You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to round 3 of the Eternal Tournament Series, the final weekly for Season 3. Once again, I'm joined here by my wonderful co-caster, Truedawn, and we are about to get into yet another exciting matchup. Lots of interesting deck lists today. We got Francois on FTS Control, and we've got Flash2351 on FTJ mid-range, and these are some spicy-looking deck lists. Truedawn, which one of these do you want to hit first?
I really like Francois' deck. We saw an iteration of this earlier, the Fire Time Shadow control deck. It's effectively a Stone Scar mid-range / control deck, but splashing time for Mystic Ascendant mainly, I would assume, but you also get Sandstorm Titan if you want to be a little bit more greedy. And Scorpion Wasp also deals with Aegis creatures very well, which the normal Shadow removal does not. We do see Francois also playing Champion of Chaos in his deck, which I think is exceptionally greedy, but he does have several Find the Way, and usually when you turn on one side of it, especially the Shadow side, which I assume would be easier, it's still good enough. So.
Yeah, and hopefully that will pay off for him. Also of note, he's got 4 Voprex in the list, so definitely hoping to get to see those cast. Because I do, I often bag on Voprex as being a bad card, but sometimes that card is just very, very fun to watch. Definitely a lot better currently than it has been, since there's a lot more mid-range decks, and with the time-based mid-range decks using the Mystic Ascendant strategy, you often do hit a situation where you can have a very nice board and reasonably built-up hand as well. So hopefully we'll get to see those cast. On Flash's side, we have FTJ mid-range, and this is another very, very interesting deck list. I mean, this is essentially another one of those Ikaria Gold variants.
Yeah, this is very similar to what we've seen Toth play a lot the past couple weeks. He has a lot of one-ofs for the toolbox, Jack, Reality Warden, Furnace Mage, stuff like that. Still have one Ikaria, one Daisho, one Sword of the Sky King. So it's just kind of normal Fire just time mid-range deck with the Rise to Challenge toolbox. So we will see how these two match up as we go into game 1.
Yeah, and taking a look at the starting hands, Flash with a little bit of a slow hand here, but he will have a Sandstorm Titan to build into. Francois, on the other hand, lacking his time right here. That's going to hurt him a little bit, since he's just going to have to lead off the depleted seat.
Yeah, it hurts him especially hard because Find the Way is how he fixes his mana, and you can't fix your mana with Find the Way unless you have time. So that's the downside of having time as the splash color. So you give situations like this where the things helps you fix your mana, it doesn't work, and then we see another Find the Way off the top, which is kind of gross. The Sabotage will hit a Great Parliament, but he sees no other targets, so the second Sabotage is going to be hard-pressed to find value.
Yeah, he will definitely be holding on to that second Sabotage for a while. And Francois immediately running into influence requirement problems, digging himself out now that he found that seat, providing time. So he will be able to go fetch up another Shadow in this case so that he can have his champion fully active next turn.
Of course.
Flash responding with the Sandstorm Titan, though.
Yeah, this Titan's big problem. It's really big. This Desert Marshal is going to make it so this Champion of Cunning doesn't trade with it. He could do it on the attack or main phase it. If he wants to attack, he has to main phase it. But then he gives us the prospect of potentially eating it if Francois likes to attack. He decides to go with the more aggressive play, get some damage in, which I understand. But again, here's this. Flash is in a situation where he has all these creatures in play and he can't play Seraph because he has this harsh rule, and it's just super awkward.
Yeah, he is in a bit of an awkward situation. I'm wondering if Francois at some point will fire off this Sabotage and end up picking up that harsh rule. That would definitely open the gate for Flash to commit a lot more of his cards to the board. In the meantime, we just see Francois doing some finding of the way, picking up a couple depleted sigils there, and just trying to smooth his power up as he climbs towards Voprex and Mystic Ascendant, both of which are going to be great here.
By the way, is a really good card in helping you bring together some of these more greedy through-color decks, but you were paying a pretty huge cost. He did nothing the turn 2. He just bricked his turn 4 to draw 2 power that will come into play depleted. So it's a whole bunch of nothing that you're doing to facilitate this mana. So I'm unclear if the mana is actually worth it. As we do see Flash elect to rise the challenge for a Starsteel Dice Show.
Yeah, and this is actually a great tell for Francois that he's probably going to hit something with the sabotage here. And in fact, we do see Francois taking that as a sign that he should go ahead and fire off of this sabotage. And now with a little bit of consideration, but definitely going to take the die show.
So Francois has the option to find the way again, just kind of keep dirtling, maybe get up to this Mystic Ascendant and or Voprax, or sabotage this turn. I think that the sabotage is likely not getting much better. They're down to 3 cards in hand. You know, one of them is a business card and Harsh Rule. Even if the other 2 cards are power, you're 33% to hit a business card. So,
yeah, if he decides to fire the Subvert here, he's got a 66% chance to hit something very useful. I mean, Harsh Rule would be good for him here. He could always Harsh Rule away this board. Wouldn't be too sad about that. If he hits Seraph, obviously that's insane. That will provide him yet another win condition in this matchup.
yeah, I think it's really going to boil down to whether or not Flash can. I think it's the power, which is the worst hit, but it's actually not the worst hit because it allows him to play Voprax next turn or Mystic Ascendant with a power drop. So power is actually not even awful.
Yeah, that is true. That's actually not terrible here. And if Flash doesn't drop this Seraph to the board, this Voprax is essentially going to be a Harsh Rule anyway, as I have to imagine Flash is going to let the board get taken away here instead of dropping this Seraph and Harsh Rule out of his hand. I mean, it's unfortunately a pretty bad situation either way. And yeah, we see Flash taking a moment to consider now, which is actually more valuable. You know, I have to think it's the hand, but I could honestly be wrong here.
I think it's the board because the Sinister Finder calls the Voprax. Also, worth noting, this is as good as you'll ever see a Voprax be.
I don't know if it's as good as we'll ever see one be. I honestly have a feeling that we're going to see some crazy Vopraxes out of Francois today, assuming he ends up going far. There are just so many mid-range lists that I can very much envision scenarios where you will have 4 or 5 units on board and 5 cards in hand, and both of which are just going to be terrible, terrible choices.
I mean, that's like possible, but it's again a Punisher mechanic. Your opponent gets the choice. They always get to choose the better one for them. So unless both options are very similar, like they were just there, it's hard to leverage. It's like a fundamental level, but we'll see if it ends up being good in mid-range situations like it was just there.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Francois exactly leads off with here. He definitely has the ability to find the way to grab a power, but since it's depleted, this puts him in an awkward situation where, yeah, he's forced into playing the Champion of Chaos here. And I almost liked the Stray into Shadows and hold the torch to take care of one of them. That way, when he swings with the Sandstorm Titans, you can actually trade everything on the board.
Yeah, that's a reasonable line. These Stray into Shadows are going to be hard pressed to find value, so I'm a fan of any line that converts him to something other than dead cards. So we'll see if it doesn't look like they're going to do that, though. We'll probably see just a trade here. Although that's really weird sequencing. You want to block first, let the damage happen, and then torch.
Yeah, that way the unit doesn't get taken care of ahead of time by anything weird, or you give your opponent any chances. A little bit of off sequencing, but nothing that's going to kill him. Maybe anyway, though. I mean, I think honestly, Flash is in a decent position to come back into this game. I really thought the Voprax was going to be enough, but like the awkwardness of not using the Stray there, I think does honestly hurt him quite a bit.
It does have a reasonable Stray here. It's weird to see this attack. Like, I don't know how much better you think that the first Stray, let alone the second Stray, is getting. Like, going a 2-1 and a 3-3 is as good as it probably gets. So, this is certainly a weird attack. You get the no block, so there's no punishment for it, but...
Yeah, there certainly could have been, and we do see Flash pick up an Auric Runehammer, to which Francois is going to have to respond by either getting the Scorpion Wasp in or torching on his next turn. And if Flash ever hits a power, then he can get this Jack into play. Jack's going to be very useful.
Jack does get checked by the other Strata Shadow, although we are at the point where the Mystic Ascendant would die from the second Strata Shadow. It would no longer be one-sided, so that does matter. And it also kind of precludes Francois from playing this Champion of Chaos. So he plays this Champion of Chaos, this Strata Shadow is pretty much dead.
Yeah, this does put him in a bit of a tricky situation, but I have to imagine he will, and he does indeed lead off this Champion of Chaos. And in the meantime, actually, that will be game. Francois having 14 damage between the board and the torch he's holding, so we are going to see him take game 1 as soon as all the formalities of passing turns and the attack phase are out of the way.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting game. I think the Voprex surprisingly was like kind of the backbreaker. Just getting a 3-for-1 out of it, or 3-for-1 was really, really good. That was the one thing that really allowed one of the players to vault ahead of the other. Everything else is kind of like just trading back and forth. So whatever big value creature ends up going unchecked, whether it be Mystic Ascendant or Voprex, is usually going to decide the game.
Yeah, definitely. And we did see Subvert there missing a key target as well. Could have also turned the tide in quite a few ways, but aReNGee not on Flash, or rather Francois' side today, as we do see our players head into the sideboard. So let's take a look at Flash's list and see what he can do to claw his way back into this game.
He does have access to things like Mystic Ascendant, Harsh Rule, Stand Together, Furnace Mage, Scorpion Wasp, Combrel Bailiff, Comber Healer, Vanquish, and Protect. The things that are relevant in this matchup, I would envision, are Stand Together, Mystic Ascendant, and Protect in some number. He just wants to protect his big threats, and also Mystic Ascendant is just a very powerful card.
Yeah, certainly. I have to imagine we'll see Vanquish make an appearance as well, since Francois, every unit he plays, I believe, gets hit by that Vanquish, so it'll be something nice. Probably not going to see the Cumbry Healers or the Copperhall Bailiffs, as there's not a ton of aggressiveness coming down the line, but not a terrible amount to put in. Maybe the Scorpion Wasp, he's worried about getting pressured, but I think if you're assuming you're going to get pressured, then you're already going to have a bit of a tough time in the matchup.
Yeah, it's interesting what role the Flash likes to play. He doesn't have to be the beatdown, but whichever side he chooses, he kind of needs to commit to that. You can't waffle between the two, or else you just end up doing neither good enough. And on the side of Francois, I would expect something like the Varas and possibly, I was going to say Passage Vians, but I'm not sure about that. It's an interesting sideboard. There's a lot of things that are like pretty marginal. Again, Vara is the big one that I expect to definitely come in, but outside of that, nothing here is really a slam dunk.
Yeah, nothing's too much of a slam dunk. We might see like a Ruin or like a pair of Ruins. Maybe the Furnace Mage comes in, something to handle the attachment destruction, since it's likely that the weapons are staying in for Flash, at least some of them. So the Ruins will probably have some reasonable targets to hit, but they're not a slam dunk, as you said. Really, the only card I expect to see for sure is the Vara.
Yeah, I would expect Francois to try and err towards a more controlling role. His deck is very slow despite the Champions of Chaos. They're just most of the time going to be 3/3s. And most in like 4/3s. 5/3 is not going to happen a lot. We saw it happen in that game, but I have to feel like that's atypical. So generally that card's just there to trade early. He doesn't really want to be beaten down. He can turn the corner with things like Sandstorm Titan and Mystic Ascendant, but I think in this matchup, you generally just want to blunt what your opponent is doing and then stabilize with the Mystic Ascendant and snowball from there.
Yeah, interesting. And this is more or less unrelated to the game itself, but Flash's deck name is FTJ Toolbox, and I just think that's kind of funny. I'm not sure if obviously he listens to the show all the time and hears us call it that, but I do think it's funny that players do recognize the deck as the Toolbox at this point with the Rise to the Challenge.
Yeah, having that level of selection, especially in a game like Eternal where the deck size is up to 75, up from the traditional 60 in this formative card game, you're not going to see the cards that are important to your deck as frequently. So things that tutor for cards like Rise of the Challenge are super good, and Rise of the Challenge even has the upside of increasing their attack, which matters a lot for a lot of different cards. So yeah, Rise of the Challenge is super good.
Yeah, I do love the toolbox decks. Like, I definitely think that Rise of the Challenge is so much of a better card in these Fiery Combria or Icaria Gold, whichever you would prefer to term them, decks, as opposed to something like Armory. I mean, Armory obviously is very powerful with the card, but Armory just doesn't have the level of selection that these decks do that I do appreciate.
We've moved here into game 2. And both players just like reasonable hands. We do see the Ruin sighted on the side of Francois and the Orc Runehammer that is likely to hit on the other side. Although Flash does have a Protect, so we may see that leveraged against the Ruin or something else. Or the Subvert. Which, notably, Francois can't cast.
Yeah, that is true, actually. He can't cast the... there we go. He really needed to pick up that Seed of Mystery, and he does. So he's got the Var's Favor to take care of that. And I think it's reasonable that Flash might honestly go for a line here where he could drop the Auric Runehammer and go face. And if he does elect to do that, we are going to see a huge punish here out of this Ruin. But deciding to take it a little bit safer and going with the Seraph, which is definitely going to be the smarter play here.
Yeah, when you're able to, you generally want to leave a Protect. So, like playing a Runehammer just for face damage, generally what not have that card's for. You get to play out your Seraph, you get to protect it. If he keeps drawing power, he'll get to keep going up the curve with the Protect in play or in hand. So that's what he would like to do, is just keep hanging out with Protect mana up. But he's a little bit choked on mana, so we'll see for how long he can keep that up.
Yeah, and man, if Francois subverts here, Flash is going to have to protect his face because that hand is very, very juicy.
Yeah, the Runehammer would be gross. Although the Desert Marshal would be fine. The Torch would be kind of bad. But Mystic Ascendant would be insane. Protect would be good. So yeah, like there's way more good hits than there are like not good hits. So that would probably necessitate a Protect.
Ooh, and here we see it coming down, Subvert, and Flash going to have to make an important decision here, whether or not he's willing to give up this Protect. And I think he's going to have to do it, and he does indeed. So he protects himself from having a card stolen, but in a way, this is just like stealing Protect and, discarding it. So he has left the shields down for the time being, and Francois is going to be in a position to hit anything he wants now.
Yeah, that was essentially asking. Flash asked himself, is this Protect worth more or less than a random card in my hand? And the answer was it was worth less. So
yeah, and I definitely feel like it has to be there. There's just too many good pulls there. Scorpion Wasp, Mystic Ascendant, and Auric Runehammer, all very solid cards. Desert Marshal as well does its part to contribute. This is an interesting attack right here. I think he's just trying to get the double block.
Yeah, it's a free attack because it could either just bump or even get through for 5. Like that is the thing that can happen too. But yeah, he's like most of the time he'll just bump with the other Sandstorm Titan. You're like, okay, sure, pass. Sometimes he'll double block and blow them out. So
yeah, I guess Flash was worried about the bump there since Francois already dropped the Var's Favor, worried that there might be another one to follow it up. So we see Francois dropping this Death Strike into Flash's Sandstorm Titan, and yeah, Flash still just choked up on power for the time being. Going to have to deal with Francois Sandstorm Titan eventually because this beatdown is starting to get very, very real.
We'll see whether or not Francois elects to Strain of Shadow or just get the Mystic Ascendant online. I'm pretty sure you just get the Mystic Ascendant online. You want to start snowballing with that card, especially now that he's going to be left with 0 creatures in play after this Wasp takes care of the Sandstorm Titan.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice time to get Mystic Ascendant down now. Before, it was a little more questionable whether you wanted to get the Mystic Ascendant down because you are overextending into a harsh rule, which we do obviously see in Flash's hand. So the benefit of our knowledge, but even still, you do have to respect the harsh rule out of your opponent.
And Flash actually has a few ways to deal with the 6/6. He could double torch it. He could just silence it, leave the 6/6 in play, deal with that later. I think double torch is likely what we're going to see here. Getting the 6/6 out of play is definitely worth it, which we do see happen.
Yeah, and we see the double torches come down, though this does increase the chance Subvert is going to hit a very solid card here. Really anything except the Desert Marshal is a great pull, and even Desert Marshal's fine because it at least silences the Seraph. But with the Mystic Ascendant off the top, we're going to instead see him go for another cycle here, and now he's going to be required to drop this Desert Marshal.
And now we're seeing Francois get a little bit punished for the way he sideboarded. He just drew both Ruins in a deck that only has 4 weapons and like they're all tutor targets. So I think that you can definitely justify siding in some number, but he's definitely drawn too many here.
Yeah, this is very unfortunate. I wonder if he did side in 2 or 3. If he sided in 3, I definitely think that would be a mistake. But if he's only sided in 2, that's fine. And ooh, we see Flash trying to get cute. He's going to try and get cute with this Auric Runehammer here, and this Ruin is going to be a bit of a blowout.
Could you say he got ruined?
You could indeed, and I mean he really did there. I mean that's so huge. And if Flash plays this power, which is important, this subvert is money. You either take a Mystic Ascendant or you take a Harsh Rule, and either's fine here. You would have preferred the Mystic Ascendant, obviously, but Harsh Rule is not a bad hit there in the slightest.
Yeah, now at worst, like the Harsh Rule is likely not going to get played this game, but at least now you are the one who has the choice of whether or not it goes off. That is worth something.
Yeah, it's worth knowing that you're safe from you're safe to overextend for a little while now. And we see 2 quarries getting fired off. First one picking up another quarry, and second one, I think that hit double power. Stream lagged out a little bit for a second there, but we see him picking up a Seed of Impulse, so I have to imagine. Curious to see if the Sabo gets fired off. It would actually hit a torch here, so.
It's interesting because usually in most matchups, like at this stage of the game, Sabotage isn't getting better, but we do know that Flash is playing Rise to the Challenge. Although anything you could Rise for that would get hit by Sabotage, you would want to Ruin instead. So it's possible the Sabotage is just dead.
Yeah, I think the Sabotage is dead. If you fired it off there, actually, it would have been very important. But oh yeah, we do see Great Parliament picked up.
Yeah, we'll get to tag the Great Parliament because Flash got a little bit greedy, wanted to keep it in hand. So a little bit punished there, but also the 4/4 flyer isn't worth a lot. But he's so far away from 8. I think not playing it was pretty greedy.
Yeah, I do as well. And Francois picks up a Sandstorm Titan off the top, and that's really important. Flash picking up his own Sandstorm Titan will be able to bounce the units if he wants, and that's pretty important here. He could also use a Jack, but Jack will get punished by this Stray in the Shadow that we see that's otherwise, kind of dead in Francois's hand.
Yeah, these sweepers have just continually looked awful in these mid-range matchups. Like, I understand to the point where you'd want them, like, if you get super far behind, they are a safety valve, you can come back with them, but when the game plays out in typical fashion, it's just they're dead.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, like, Stray in the Shadows doesn't make a ton of sense to me in the with how much mid-range there is hanging around, because the mid-range decks so often have units that are just so far above the Stray. Like, the average unit in these mid-range decks has 5 to 6 health, and it just gets blanked on the Stray. It's a little bit confusing.
Francois could have been like on level 2 where everyone's playing mid-range, or level 3 either, because everyone's playing mid-range, and then there's people who wants to beat the people playing mid-range, and then you build your deck to beat the people trying to beat the people playing mid-range. So the Stray of Shadows are good against things like Rakano, and they're not awful in this matchup. We have seen him able to leverage it a couple times for more than 0 value. So I do agree that it's worse than Harsh Rule in these mid-range matchups, and Harsh Rule's pretty bad to begin with too, but it's okay enough.
This Voprex is actually really devastating here because Flash really does not want to give up his board, but he absolutely has to. He cannot afford to get rid of this Mystic Ascendant and the Seraph, but this does put him in a situation where another 5 damage gets pushed through. Flash gonna picking up a very timely Harsh Rule here, going to be able to clean up the board and force Francois to find yet another threat.
It is timely that whenever I bash Harsh Rule, it immediately shows up to be decent. This is timely.
Yeah, timely indeed. I mean, he absolutely needed that there. I think had Harsh Rule not been picked up or some way to remove that Voprex, this was just going to be game. And we just see these subverts for Francois just always hitting the wrong targets. And that power actually would have been decent if Flash hadn't picked up another one, because he would have shut down the Mystic Ascendant for a little bit. But with the top deck, power is just really so unimportant.
Yeah, these matchups keep like these tie mid-range games because continually end up being about Mystic Ascendant. Like whoever's able to stick Mystic Ascendant, and we do see the harsh rule having to come out there, but we may see just Seraph and tap depleted power and say, okay, can you kill this? And if not, I have inevitability. I think that waiting to 11 is just way too far away for Flash. I think you just have to hit Slam Seraph and hope they don't have it. And if they had to harsh roll the Mystic Ascendant, it is likely they don't have any other removal.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you're throwing, you know, a 5-power harsh rule that could otherwise create a lot of value into just a single Mystic Ascendant, it should signal one of two things to your opponent. Either you don't have any other removal, or you really, really want to build this board up, and you want to get the harsh rule off now while it's not going to be bad. But we don't see that matter. Although Subvert, this Subvert will actually be useful. This will be the best of the subverts so far, since that Valkyrie Enforcer will be able to silence down the Seraph, which is very, very important here.
Yeah, that was decent. He's drawn a bunch of subverts. Oh, but here's a Karia. There is a Wasp on the other side, unfortunately, though.
Yeah,
that Karia would have been excellent.
Yeah, this Akari is just going to run headfirst into this Wasp. And Wasp is just so good against Akaria. Just absolutely devastating here. We do see at least, 3 damage getting pushed through. But the 3 damage when Francois is at 18 is a lot less important than Francois' 3 damage when Flash is at 9.
I mean, Flash still has a Warcry 5 thing coming. He is on a 2-turn clock, which he needs to deal with in the next 2 turns. But if he draws a Titan or anything that could deal with this Valkyrie, Francois on air. At least he was until a second ago.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if we're going to see Voprex get played down. And no, Francois wisely trying to play around the harsh rule.
I think that's like really greedy because right now, like he needs just like a removal spell sets you back. But if you Voprex and they draw the harsh rule, then you lose your 2 dudes, but they lose the Seraph too, so you're just back to neutral. I think you just like force them to have harsh rule there.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I think since you did mention that the Warcry 5, I think you do have to respect that in a top deck war that Warcry 5 might be what buries you, since you're really only holding a single ruin. You have to get lucky that it hits a weapon. Either way, doesn't end up mattering there, since we do see Francois finishing that game out with the stolen Valkyrie Enforcer and taking the series 2-0 over Flash with what ends up being some very impressive Voprexes.
Yeah, Voprex looked great there. Like you said, there were a lot of situations where the opponent had some number of things in play and some number of things in hand. In situations like that, the 2 options that your opponent has to choose between are both bad, so it being a Punisher mechanic is mitigated. It's unclear how often those situations happen, whether or not that game was typical or whether or not that's as good as we're ever going to see Voprex being. But it certainly worked out that game, and if the games continue to play out that way, Voprex will be great.
Yeah, I gotta say, I bagged really hard on Loco Pojo in the Season 2 Invitational when I was casting it for playing Voprex specifically, because I just thought the card was terrible. And in the matchup he ended up in the finals, it actually was a decent card. And as we move towards more of those decks like Big Combri or like your mid-range style 3-colored or 3-faction decks, I really do feel that Voprex might honestly have a place in some of these control decks. He can put your opponent in very awkward situations multiple times. Even when we see Voprex just come down there on that other turn, providing a 5/5 flying overwhelm body on top of sack your Sandstorm Titan. Like, sometimes that's just decent enough. A 5/5 flyer with Overwhelm plus a removal spell tacked onto it, isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it's so the thing with Punisher mechanics, which is what you call a mechanic where your opponent gets to choose one of the options, is that the options need to be similar enough where their choice doesn't matter. And like when you get to points where they have like 3 cards in hand, a couple things in play, and like they're both decisions are bad, then Voprex is great. It's just that those decisions usually, like, there are those situations don't usually come up at turn 7 or later in most matchups. But if the format is super slow, like it has been, then that will come up more frequently and possibly frequently enough for Voprex to be a good card.
That's very, very crazy. Yeah, we did get to see some very crazy Voprexes though. I mean, I have to admit, There definitely are going to be a lot of situations where, like you're talking about, the punish mechanic does allow Voprex to basically blank itself. And also, if you hit a situation where the board is empty or the hand is empty, then it's definitely a blank. But in some of those mid-range matchups, I definitely think it will find a home where it will, create a situation where your opponent doesn't, have the best choice in the world. But doesn't seem like it's going to be great all the time, like you're saying. I don't think it's going to be like a staple particularly, but I certainly think that it's going to have its place. Like, I think some people can make it work.
If you're playing a slow Stone Scar deck, it's probably good enough. But we do have another backup match between HiThar and looks like Ozymandias.
Yeah, that was about what I was going to put it at. So yeah, Ozymandias and HiThar just getting into game 3, tied up 1 apiece. HiThar looks like he is on. I think this is going to be Big Combry, but it's a little hard to tell right out of the gate. Let's see if we can get some deck info in the meantime while we're watching this mulligan. And yeah, we see him go ahead and ship that hand back. Looks like a much stronger hand here out of him. I'm curious as to what Ozymandias is on, since we do see Combry Healer in HiThar's deck. Maybe that's just main board, but he might have brought it in for the matchup.
Yep. So yeah, this looks like Herald Song. Interesting. Hold on, let me look up this deck list.
Whoa! And he just discarded Privilege of Rank.
We need to do some research gathering here.
Yeah. He just used a Herald Song to discard a Privilege of the Rank, which, as I'm sure a lot of players are unfamiliar with, that does in fact make Privilege of the Rank cast. So he did grab 2 Justice Sigils, and we just got word that Ozzy is on Huru control. So this is very interesting.
Yeah, it's it looks like the Herald Song is just for value Privilege of Ranks. It's like a bad cantrip, but good enough in this deck, especially when you hit Privilege of Rank. But largely it's just a blue-green control deck for Channel the Tempest to close the game out, for Throne Warden to help him live, for Orc Runehammer. One of the problems I've noticed with this deck, however, is when I played it, is that Orc Runehammer is pretty bad in a deck where you can't pump its power, and this deck can't really pump its power outside of Inspire getting lucky. So for things like Sandstorm Titan and anything bigger than 4 toughness, you can really pretty easily cold a Orc Runehammer.
And that may be part of the reason why we see these Combry Healers. And again, they could just be standard in HiThar's list. I'm not too sure without taking a look at the deck list myself. But I mean, like you were saying, that if Ozzy is holding an Orc Runehammer, it's looking pretty bad when this 2/5 Combry Healer is sitting on the board.
Yeah, and it's you really want to run that interaction, because Orc Runehammer plus Thornboard is really good, but it's really good when you can pump both of those, because both of those are like below rate. Like 4 damage on turn 4 isn't going to kill most things. A 4/4 on turn 5 is pretty small, but they both have really good abilities, and when you can make them larger, even just by 1 or 2, they become exceptional. So precluding your deck from doing that, and your deck not having the ability to do that, is a pretty big strike against it. Although he's getting paid off in having better mana. He has access to Channel the Tempest. So he is paying costs in that regard, but he's getting paid off elsewhere.
Yeah, and we do see Ozzy taking a little bit of a beat down here from HiThar, and I wonder if Ozzy had a harsh rule there, because that harsh rule was going to be very important. I was going to make a note of that, that he really wanted to harsh rule on turn 5, since we see HiThar holding this stand together, and these Combry Healers are going to be a nuisance to deal with, although Desert Marshal is definitely a good start.
Certainly. And I think we're just going to try and see HiThar to build up to this Mystic Ascendant. It's likely one of the more important cards in the matchup. That Dawnwalker was a really good draw, because it allows him to extend the board without actually extending out of the board. And he gets to leave up Stand Together if he even wants to do that. So,
oh, man. And
HiThar's a good spot.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't play Dawnwalker very often, but when you hit it with Stand Together, the Aegis and the +1/+1 will stick to it permanently, correct?
Forever, yes.
Oh man, that's going to be absolutely disgusting if we end up seeing a 5-2 overwhelm Aegis Dawnwalker hitting the table. But Valkyrie and Force are going to try and silence it. Going to see that stand together though.
I think that's good enough to pull the trigger on the stand together. You really want the Dawnwalker to retain its recursion ability. You still pump these; they can block the Iron Thorn. Yeah, you're still in a great spot here.
So another interaction that I have to be a little curious about, as I said, I'm not someone who plays a ton of Dawnwalkers. Ooh, Westwind Herald, very interesting. When you play Mystic Ascendant and pump it up, that does not trigger the Dawnwalker, correct?
It does not, no, because it is entering as a 4/4.
Okay. So, unfortunately, that Dawnwalker is going to be a little stranded for the time being after it goes down. Although, wow, not actually electing to trade here. Interesting. I'm kind of surprised that we didn't see the Valkyrie Enforcer come down. But I guess you do have to respect that the recursion will just make it even more of a headache if you take care of it right there.
Yeah, if you have the life to spare to not trade and like can't let them get value, because with Dawnwalker you'd like to do that, because imagine HiThar has like a 5-power creature in hand. He really wants to use it to get back Dawnwalker. So by not blocking there, you put them in the awkward spot of playing their 5-power creature and no longer being able to recur Dawnwalker, or just not playing out their 5-power creature. So that's generally why you wouldn't want to block that spot.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to what things Ozzy has cast, and maybe he will take this opportunity to fire off something like a Channel into the Channel the Tempest here, since he does have the ability to pick up a free cast here with this Westwind Herald. He believes anyway that it will go unchecked, and yeah, I think we see him go ahead and dropping the Wisdom right there so that he has a much better target to pull.
Or Grunhammer likely taking care of Seraph, and then that gives HiThar a decision, which he made pretty quickly, of whether or not he wanted to save the Seraph or kill the Westwind Herald. He's going to elect to kill the Westwind Herald, which I agree with. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think you do have to take care of the Westwind Herald in that situation for sure. And, obviously HiThar very comfortable swinging back on his next turn, since Ozzy doesn't have a lot to block with currently. And there's the silence for the Dawnwalker. That's going to be pretty nasty. We do see a Valkyrie Enforcer picked up for HiThar, though, so that will give him some options as we continue on in this game.
Yeah, and Tyler's still in a great spot. You'd like to get this Mystic Ascendant online, but he has a bunch of pressure in play. He could even fire off this Valkyrie to get rid of the Iron Thorn, or at least get rid of its ability. So Ozzy could have channels to like snowball the game out of control. But if he doesn't, and this Mystic Ascendant gets to go unchecked, then that's like the game will come down to.
Yeah, and we're going to see if... I feel like you have to Valkyrie Enforcer this Martial Ironthorn, right now, because that one-sided board wipe effect is very close to going off, and Ozzy very likely would have had it in 2 turns. So
yeah, there's also worth considering that Ozzy's at 7. There's a bunch of power on board. That Vanquish helps alleviate a lot of the pressure, but I was considering it might have been worth on HiThar's side to silence the Valkyrie to get your Valkyrie through in the air. That ended up not mattering because we see the second Orc Runehammer, but maybe you wanted to be more aggressive there as HiThar, but I think there's definitely cost to it, relieving the Iron Thorn with its ability intact.
yeah, certainly. And I think we see Ozzy passing here. Oh, no, he was going to get in with the Valkyrie Enforcer. Was curious as to if he was going to allow the same trade he had a turn prior, where he used the Martial Ironthorn and the other Valkyrie Enforcer to trade off with these 3/6 Combri healers, since they are just a big nuisance for him.
Yeah, these Combri healers are super annoying. They check the 5/5, they check the Runehammer. So Ironthorn is pretty good here. The Runehammer can't kill it. Ironthorn still can't attack. If they draw power, then they get to draw 2 cards off the Mystic Ascendant. Their Parliament is online. The Vanquish, though, is pretty good here. And we'll probably actually see attack, by both from Ozzy, because if the 3/6 does block, then the Orc Runehammer actually gets to kill it. So now his board is uncontested. So Ozzy's clawing back. Oh, and actually the Throne Warden makes this way better.
Yeah, and the Throne Warden was huge there, because we see Great Parliament hanging out in HiThar's hand, and that Great Parliament very likely was going to come down this turn had that not been buffed up, because the 4/4 would have checked the Valkyrie in the air and then also provided him a 2-turn clock.
Yeah, definitely. And HiThar was in a really awkward spot because you want to save the power to draw a card with Mystic Ascendant, but you want to get up to 8 power for the Parliament. So he elected to keep like the power in hand so he could do this turn, but it ended up not mattering. But it might have cost him if he ended up not drawing power. He couldn't get the second owl. Having one less 4/4 is probably going to matter. So
yeah, and I think we will see. I like another board swing here. I think I like going in and then just if he's willing to block with the Mystic Ascendant, which he obviously is not in this case, then you can obviously punish it with the Auric Rune Hammer. But since he's not going to make that block, I'm hoping Ozzy has a follow up.
yeah, you can't make that attack unless you will follow up of some kind. And yeah, the Lightning Storm does it, gets that low enough. Although this Parliament plus Xenon Obelisk is a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Parliament tokens I think are going to have to. Well, they won't necessarily die here, but one of them certainly will have to get traded away because Ozzy.
Well, there's 6/6s because of the Obelisk. If you play the Obelisk in the Parliament.
Oh, right. Yeah, I have this weird thing where I always forget that Parliament is not a power surge spell. Like I always feel like it's a power surge spell because you're working in multiples of 4. But you're correct; it only costs 4 power. So now that there's 6/6s, this does create quite a problem for Ozzy. He really would love to just hit a space here and then harsh rule this board. I feel like.
Yeah. A removal spell is not quite lethal. The 5/5 could get blocked, and then only 7 comes through, putting HiThar to 1. So HiThar's kind of safe to at least untap.
Yeah, he should certainly survive this turn. I think the only combination of things that I think would kill him here would be like Sword of the Sky King plus a Permafrost, which would handle both of the owls and leave his board intact. But barring that, HiThar is definitely going to get to see another untap. But I think this is going to be the A space plus harsh rule play.
Yeah, it certainly seems reasonable if he can't be the 6/6s because he is at 3 himself. He needs these to die. This is the lethal crackback.
Actually, if he has another Lightning Storm here, this is also actually really good.
Yeah, Lightning Storm would be exceptional. Channel the Tempest. Also lethal.
Would also be lethal either way, but Echo, obviously giving him the extra damage puts him at 6 instead of 5. Not like it matters though. Channel go ahead and closing that game out. And wow, a very, very close game 3 there between HiThar and Ozzy. Ozzy scraping that one out right at the end with that very clutch Channel.
Yeah, Channel's a really good card. Giving decks that don't traditionally have reach matters a lot. It's also just a draw 3 in a format that does not have a huge density of card draw. So despite the fact that it's 8 mana, it's one of the bigger reasons to play Horror Control. Being able to facilitate the quad primal requirement gains you access to that card, and it'll do stuff like that on a pretty frequent basis.
Jeez, that was a heck of a match right there. Like,
yeah, and we do have some information on our 3-0 decks. We have Waladil, who is on Callus, currently at 3-0. We have Kalimdir, who's come out of retirement recently, so it's off to a good start at 3-0. Angry Chicken, also, who has made a top 8 in 2 of the last 3 events, also on track to top 8. So a lot of good competition here today at the Turtle Tournament Series.
Yeah, lots of great competition and a lot of very interesting decks making it all the way up. I'm curious to see what Angry Chicken is on. Kalimdir, obviously, we saw him earlier. I'm backing up really quick to check out what list he was on because I forgot. Unfortunately, I believe he was on one of the 3 color combinations. Yeah, he was on TJP mid-range, which we've seen a lot of today. Lots of people bringing the TJP mid-range deck. And it's definitely seems to have paid off for quite a few of our players, Kalimdir included.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. I think that the jig is up. People know that people are playing like these slow mid-range decks, these 3-color decks. And if you're going to play one of those slow 3-color decks, you might as well have it be one that involves Cerso and Crystallize, so you can actually beat the other slow 3-color decks. And then we see on the other end the Fire Time Shadow decks that with the Subvert and the Sabotage and the Voprax also preying upon those mid-range decks, just a different way.
Yeah, definitely definitely preying upon those decks in a different way. Yeah, I think is that all the information? Yeah, I think those are all of our notable 3-0 players. Obviously, we got to see 2 great matches right there, including that last game, which I've got to say, man, that Huru control deck, I don't know if it's the best deck, but that was pretty exciting to watch him find a way to close that game out. Every single time he played something, I was just kind of on the edge of my seat, like what's the next card going to be? Never even had a harsh rule, which is pretty surprising, actually.
Yeah, well navigated, definitely.
Yeah, Channel of the Tempest, a very, very fun card to see, and now I can definitely see some cute interactions with Channel of the Tempest and Westwind Herald. But I think we are going to go to a short break, folks. Round 3 is already over, so pairings for round 4 I think are about to get posted, and then we will be coming back in just a few moments with coverage of round 4. So stay tuned, do not go anywhere. We will be right back.